This was our back porch. As you can see, it was quite a challenge. A normal square or rectangular porch would have been no problem, but ours happens to be one of the most difficult to screen in, with high angles and fancy brickwork. We have a 10-foot high column on one side, an 8-foot column on the other side, and it's 17-foot high at the highest point. All the columns had this brick detail at the top and bottom. I researched on the internet for advice on how to work with these issues. Of all the videos, etc., on screening in porches, there was nothing that resembled ours, so I thought I'd create my own video. When I first looked at the space, I thought screening the whole thing would be the best thing aesthetically, but I had no idea how I would get to that high part. Being that high up on a ladder and where to rest the ladder made me choose the option of an open lattice ceiling 8 feet high. This was the plan, so I designed and ordered materials accordingly. I planned to attach a beam from A to B in picture 1 and a beam from A to B in picture 2. These would support a framed lattice panels across the top. This is a 10.5-foot span, so I wasn't 100% sure this was going to work. Then I was going to add a screen from the C line in picture 2 down to the lower line. First day of project, I cut my 2x6s to fit the brick columns, held the planks up to mark where the mortar would be, then pre-drilled holes through the wood with my drill press. This was mainly to avoid changing the bit. Using a masonry bit, I drilled into the mortar and fastened using concrete anchor screws. I worked pretty slowly on this project. It was very hot and I had to go inside and cool off every few minutes. The first day I attached 5 of the 6 boards to the brick. Day 2 I attached pieces where the brick was layered. Then I used a tall cat tree to hold the vertical studs in place while I attached the top board. After I'd completed one wall and started on the second, more difficult angled wall, my wonderful neighbour, who has had much experience with Habitat for Humanity as well as making improvements to his own home, came over. He looked at what I was doing and thought it was going to be difficult. I asked him, after telling him my plans, how would you do it? Well, of course, he told me he'd frame all the way to the top. That aesthetically it would look best and be easier than the plan I had. I spent the next day making a new plan, after making sure my husband would be around to help with that high part, of course. I started working on the lower part of the high triangular area. I framed as much as I could, going as high as I was comfortable with. By the end of work day 3, I had completed framing one section and most of the second section. Day 4. The 6-foot high triangular area. For this I needed my husband's help. I had him attach this vertical plank that I had already measured, miter cut and attached to the 13-inch horizontal piece that went across the very top. I'd also pre-started some screws, so all he would have to do is drill them in. Then I had him measure, I would cut them, then he'd attach the diagonal pieces and that last vertical board. Our neighbour Rod, who has been retired for several years, made me nervous also when he got on the ladder to hold the level and pass boards. Second section framed, yay! Day 5. After taking the rest of the weekend off, I started on the last 10-foot high section. I ripped a miter cut along a 10-foot 2x4 and attached the last board to the brick on the angled wall. I got most of the framing done for this section, and then after dark, working inside, I removed the screen from the purchased screen door, applied 2 coats of paint, and then the next morning reattached the screen. Day 6, I started by adding another 2x4 either side of the door frame. Even though it's just a screen door and pretty light, I decided to do that anyway. I also drilled through the wood, then into the mortar, and attached the upper beams between the brick above. Then I started painting. I started with a chemical blocking primer as I was using pressure treated lumber, a recommendation from a video I had watched when researching. I only primed the areas that would not be covered with trim. When painting the top color coat, I used an outdoor paint with primer and painted everything. This took up day 7 and day 8. If I were 1.5 inches taller, I'm 4'11", I could have painted that very top board, and I wasn't comfortable going up one more rung on the ladder, so another few minutes of help from my hubby. Day 9, putting up the screen. I only did the first side this day because I was afraid it would tear if a strong wind came through before I could completely secure it with the trim. So day 10, I ripped all the trim from 1/2 inch thick 6 by 8 foot fence slats. I was able to get 6 each 1 3/4 inch pieces of trim, ripping them through the thickness down to 3/16 of an inch. I painted them indoors where it was cooler. Day 11, screened in the 10-foot section and added trim to both sections. I ripped a couple of the 1/2 inch cedar fence slats to 3.5 inches wide to trim over the double 2x4 frame around the door. Day 12, the last and most difficult section. I attached screen to a frame made from the trim to make it easier to do the highest section. I attached scrap pieces in an X, which were removed later, to make it sturdier. With my husband's help, we were able to get that top section screened. I definitely felt more comfortable on the little giant ladder than a regular extension ladder, thanks to my friend Francis for letting me borrow it. I continued screening and trimming the lower levels of the last section and installed the screen door. Day 13, finished! Well, almost. I had to plane the door to close properly and install the last few pieces of trim. I added a small piece of trim around the door frame for the door to close against and a hook and eye. I had to install the door going out instead of in because the patio floor was sloping out. I realized this once I had installed the door opening inward and couldn't open it more than a foot, and I didn't want a large gap under my door. Okay, now finished. Yay! Okay, one last thing. I had to go to Home Depot and rent a powder activated...
Hello, so this right here is the Hilti DX2 powder actuated tool, which uses a 22 to drive nails to attach 2x4s to concrete. So I've never used one before. I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit intimidated. I have shot a gun before. I watched the video on how to do this, so we'll see. Put the nail in the end there, put the strip of bullets through there, and then, okay. So, I'm gonna try this, push down on it. Ooh, forgot the safety glasses. But that worked. Yeah, the masonry bit was just not even touching this concrete to be able to drive fasteners in that way. But anyway, there's one, and I have about a dozen more to go.